Welcome to the 5-8, where we take 5 of the week's most fucked up topics and discuss them for 8 minutes each. 5 topics, 8 minutes, 2 hosts, 1 guest, some singing, a lot of curse words, and as many cocktails as we deem necessary. LB, how are you?
I forgot my drink.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. I'm going to have to get it during the break.
It looks like you forgot a lot of other things. Are you okay? Do you need us to rescue you?
Yeah. I need some rescuing. Thank God for lipstick. I'm sorry, guys. Like just a minute ago, the light was perfect, and now it's moved down. I'm in front of a window. I'm in an empty house. As you can see, the movers are actually here right now. So you might hear some banging and moving around.
Above and beyond, you get the gold star because we don't want to disappoint the many people watching today that waited patiently a whole week for us. And here you are on a very stressful day, joining us from an empty house without any curtains. It's good.
I know. Did you hear that? That bang bang? That's Aloe. Let's see if Aloe opens the door and comes in.
Okay. We don't know. Aloe is LB's dog. So,
here she comes.
Here she comes. Here she comes.
Okay,
we're off to a good start. We're off to a good start.
Oh, that's her tail on the fan. Okay. It's exciting. Okay. All right, you're in the camera.
So I thought we'd open real quick with a little game because I know you've had a hard day and I wanted to add some levity here. Okay. Okay, and maybe the people watching, our beloved audience, can play this game as well. This game is called Cage Match, and I just made it up 5 minutes ago, maybe 10. Okay, so here's the thing. As we know, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are going to fight, apparently, in some sort of cage match. Yes. I don't really know what a cage match is. I think that both people are allowed to survive, I guess. Unfortunately, but that's apparently what it is. They're going to box or something, I would say for charity, but I don't think it's for any reason other than to feed their own ridiculous egos. But in our game called Cage Match, I'm going to give you 2 contestants in a cage match, and I want your thoughts on who you think would win.
Okay.
Okay? That's the game. Okay,
we're gonna just, okay, anybody, anything goes, right? Any kind of...
You're locked in a cage, like Bond with Oddjob at the end of Goldfinger.
Okay. Yeah. You can bring whatever. Okay. All right. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. Number 1, Don Jr. versus Eric Trump.
Oh, Junior wins.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Eric could just sit on him, but no, he's crazy. He's crazy. He'll be like, he's like a little Tasmanian, he's crazy. He wins.
I'm not gonna argue with you. Okay. Ted Cruz versus Josh Hawley.
I mean, I feel like what would happen was Ted Cruz would have a lot of really bad gas, and Josh Hawley would just pass out. So I'm going to give that one to Ted Cruz because Josh Hawley doesn't have. He's just so effeminate.
No, but what you're forgetting, though, is that Josh Hawley, much like the scene in The Life of Brian, would just run until Ted Cruz got so tired from chasing him that he would collapse. I think that's what happened.
I think Cruz would gas him out. Sorry.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with that. Marjorie Taylor Greene versus Lauren Boebert. I think this one really happened, but what do you think?
Oh, that goes to Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's like Junior. She's crazy. She'll do it. She'll bring her backpack with her bomb in it. That's it. It's over. It's over for Boebert.
Okay. Rudy Giuliani versus John Eastman.
Eastman.
Yeah, I think so too. But I'm not allowed to say. I'm going to plead the 5th. I'm going to plead the 5th on this one.
Oh yeah, 5th.
5th. For our guest waiting backstage, we have a rule that whenever we mention the 5th, everybody has to drink. That's our rule.
Yeah, except I don't have. Oh, I have water.
Okay.
I have water.
Good. Okay, and last but not least, RFK Jr. versus that QAnon guy who thinks he's JFK Jr.
I'm going to give it to the QAnon guy.
Because he's crazy?
Because they're both ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But they want us to take them seriously. and I'm gonna go with the guy that survived flying his plane upside down into the ocean over RFK, who's I don't know, but he's all the one person that's had a lot of vaccines is probably RFK. I think that's all just a hyped out joke. I don't know that guy. I can't with that guy. He's so loose. I'm gonna make it. I'll come in. I'll tap in.
Okay.
Now. Yeah.
Okay. I like the sound of that. Okay, that's our game. It's called Cage Match. We'll probably never play it again. Just to get everybody warmed up. Everybody warmed up. There's a lot of things happened. I've forgotten about most of them. I forgot everything that happened last week, so I know.
I don't know what happened. I really don't, guys. The Supreme School. Let's get into it. Let's get into it.
We have a great guest, and he's going to come and talk, and then it's going to be good at that point.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Hang on. Let me go back. Set my timer.
Okay, we still have the timer. It's the one thing you have left in this house of emptiness.
I've got my phone.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay. Are we on?
We're on. We're time. The time is ticking.
Okay, victors and villains is the first subject and topic today. So, okay, we have Joe Biden right now, who's done a lot of really good shit, and this is the week he's rolling out stuff because lots of good things are happening because of policies that he put in place. And what's everybody talking about this week? Not that stuff, right? It's just not that way because we have the Supreme Court shit that we're going to talk about later. Trump did bad things. There's so many things going on that these amazing accomplishments that Biden Harris have rolled out, people are just like, yeah, whatever. And instead of giving him credit for all the many things that he's accomplished, people are giving him shit about student loan debt being, maybe the Supreme Court saying, no. Although per Adam Schiff, there's a workaround and people are going to get their debt in some way. But people are giving Biden shit like this is his fault, right? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Are you just coming out of it? I was
going to say, are we sure that it's really as impactful as the noise? It does feel to me to be a lot of that is manufactured noise or jumped on noise and bandwagon noise. I'm not sure how many people are actually tuned into the whole, we're not going to get I don't know. That feels like a lot of chatter to me, a lot of loud banging of the pots and pans.
You mean the student loan thing specifically?
Yeah, it does. It feels
there does seem to be a lot of weaponization of that by the horseshoe left, for sure.
And it's also in its lane on Twitter and social media, and I've chosen to be out of that lane, and I don't hear it anywhere else. But, so that could.
That's good.
I'm not hearing a lot lately, so.
The other thing that happens is, Republicans vote against these things, then they get rolled out, and then the Republicans are like, "Isn't this great? What I just did?" Like Tommy Tuberville did with the broadband in Alabama. Isn't it wonderful that broadband's coming to Alabama? Dude, you voted against it. You thought this was a bad idea. And now you're saying, and the people that he's talking to, his voters are, I'm just going to go out on a limb here, not smart enough to know that he's lying to them because they weren't smart enough to know that he was lying to them when they voted for him. Right. So, this is a problem.
They're also not, they're in their bubble. We still have these bubbles. I liked what Biden did by calling him out in a speech. It's not something I think that would ever, it's like people coming in and out of here. It's not something that I would think would ever get picked up inside that bubble. I think they would kind of probably leave that soundbite out. But that did make the rounds and people were talking about it on the socials. So hopefully that pierced the bubble.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what
now this brings us to the point here of my little, furtive ranting. There's a piece by Micah L. Sifri that my friend sent me where he's quoting something else. I want to read from this and I want to get your take on it because I think this is an interesting idea. And if people haven't heard this, this is what it is. And I'm reading. Okay. The Biden administration is embarking on a big push to convince Americans that its major legislative accomplishments are changing their lives for the better. But while they're investing in America, 3-week Barnstorm will have lots of ribbon-cutting style events. It's questionable how much of an impact this will have on public opinion. As Deepak Bhargava, Shahrzad Shams, and Harry Hanbury write in Democracy Journal, in The Death of Deliverism, that's the name of article. It's time we took seriously the possibility that working class Americans of all colors are so profoundly disillusioned they can't believe it when government does something good for them. Okay? And he gives examples of this. And then, it's long been an article of faith among liberals and leftists, they write, that if you deliver for the people, specifically if you deliver economic improvements in people's lives through policy, these changes will solidify or shift people's political allegiances. However, progressive economic policies do not necessarily lead to the political outcomes that deliverism predicts they should, and deliverism is proving ineffectual as a response to authoritarianism. People are fully capable of supporting or ignoring progressive economic policies while voting for authoritarians. What should progressives do? Start by abandoning the assumption that technocratic solutions will be enough and take identity, emotion, and storytelling that names clear villains a lot more seriously. Stories without villains make no sense to anyone, the authors write. The mainstream Democratic Party's tendency to avoid naming corporations as bad actors, whether pharmaceutical companies or big banks, is politically disastrous. They need villains, LB. They need stories about villains. Any villains come to mind? What do you think about that?
I think we've been saying this for 7 fucking years.
We have.
We have been saying this forever. You cannot policy wonk your way out of an authoritarian narrative that's sweeping people and radicalizing them. You can't, and this lust for a strong man that is happening now here in response to a couple of things, right? A couple of, I think very specifically, you know, we had the white lash to Obama, and then, oh my God, how dare that woman try to go for the presidency? So that there's a, the people who are pushing that narrative and have always been pushing that narrative on the side of the strong man, of the authoritarian bent, what we keep calling out of this sort of fascistic stuff that's happening here. And some of it straight up, you know, is not even cloaked. It's not even, you know, kind of, sort of, or it's, you know, we've got laboratories of states from Texas to Florida for an American version of authoritarianism, right? Those are labs. They're cooking it up. They're coming up with the state laws and then floating it up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court's coming back down and giving them more and more power to have these, you know, their own policies that people like because they're based on hatred. That their audience likes that. They want the villain. They want to feel like they're great. They're the good guys. You're the bad guys. Us, them, they. You always listen to their propaganda channels and it's they. I don't think any of those hosts can get through. Oh, I would say in less than 2 minutes. There's no way they could make it for 120 seconds without using the word they. They want you to do this and they want you to do that. It's very effective. It works and it does become policy. It does. And then it takes away, starts stripping all of our rights. So they do the villainization first and the policy second.
Yep.
They capture the narrative first with the storytelling, with coming up with these lanes and these roles for people so everybody can feel great about themselves and point a finger at somebody else, and it works. I'm not saying we have to otherize, but we need to have some kind of narrative, some kind of story, some kind of way of talking about who we are as a people and what we want for our nation. It can't just be Joe saying the same 3 lines over and over again. It needs to come from the entire party. We've been constantly floating semantics there for 7 years. Just grab onto the stuff that, and villainizing, and inside of that, villainizing the real villains. Trump was a business front for organized crime. Start talking about that. You can't deny that. And then follow it with the policies of, and this is what we're going to do about it. This is what we're going to do to keep advancing progressive beliefs. But you cannot just do that and expect people to fucking figure it out. They're not paying attention to that. They're not, and they never will. They never will. And it's also so ignorant to do that, for the party to continue to not start casting these roles and figuring out the semantics. So ignorant of them to do that and think, oh, we'll just make people's lives better. And then, of course, they'll thank us. Of the kinds of semantics and weaponization and radicalization that has been going on for decades against the government itself.
Yeah.
Which is what that article was saying. Against, like, it's all like, oh, the government, don't trust the federal government. The federal government, no, look at what we're going to destroy the administrative state and deconstruct it and get rid of it. Now we're hearing from Ron DeSantis and these other people. We're getting this Rick Perry shit from way back when that everyone laughed at. We're going to get rid of the EPA. We're going to get rid of education, Department of Education. We're going to get rid of all of these things, right? Because we have to get rid of the government. And then they complain, right?
Yep.
When the roads are broken, whatever.
Yeah. They do.
So
they do.
I have a lot to say about all of that. I'm sorry. I don't think that was too secure. Oh, I can't even talk.
Circuitous. Okay, let's go to the next thing, which is just going to be piggybacking on this first thing anyway.
Yeah, let's do it. Go for it.
Yeah, that was good. I knew you would respond to that.
Okay, good. You picked a good one for me because I didn't have time for any prep.
Yeah, well, you played volleyball. I'm setting you up here. That's what I'm doing. Setting you up to spike the ball. Okay, that's what we're doing.
Okay, let's sum it up.
So Biden, I think go ahead.
Let's sum it up. Dems, get your shit together. Get your semantics together. Get your narrative together. Start using your words.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Biden is good at this, by the way. And people are pointing this out in the comments, and it's true. Biden is good at this, and he does do it. He smacked Tuberville down this week, which was fantastic. But it has to be the whole party. It's the senators who are just out to lunch a lot of the time. I feel like, okay, villains. Speaking of villains, Leonard Leo, the captured court. Okay. I wrote the first of a piece on Leonard Leo on Tuesday, trying to do one of my man in the middle. It got so unwieldy, I had to break it into two. And this guy has so many connections all over the place. I'm going to talk about the religious stuff and the right-wing billionaires this coming week. But he has undergone this entire process where he's remade the court over the course of 3 decades. He's pushed his people in there, and now he's got what he wants. He got his fascists on the court. That's what he has. So, like, I wanted to talk. We have to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court rulings, which all of them sucked. Frankly, even the one that everyone thought was okay actually also sucked. That's number 5 we're going to talk about later. But I don't think we need to go into the weeds of that here. We're not lawyers. Let the law experts parse this stuff out. My overarching take on this is, of course, that's what they fucking did. These are fascists. They're just doing whatever Leonard Leo wants is what they're doing, right? Leonard Leo doesn't like gay people. What do you know? They find some woman who is a web designer and won't. It's not even a real thing that happened that they have to be the arbiters of. It's complete bullshit. But Leonard Leo doesn't like gays, so we have to have a ruling against gays. Leonard Leo doesn't like abortion, so we have to have Dobbs, overruled. Leonard Leo doesn't like abortion, so coming soon, we're going to have no more abortion pills anywhere in the country. Leonard Leo doesn't like women, so affirmative action has to go. Yeah, and on it goes. And Leonard Leo doesn't like the fact that Leonard Leo doesn't get what he wants, and therefore they're going to fuck up the voting system so badly that we're not going to have any say anymore, and we're going to wind up like Hungary, where we're just going to vote and it's not going to matter because Leonard Leo controls all the shit. See what I just did there? I named the villain. And we can, I know the writers are on strike, but if we gathered them all and came up with a villain name for this guy, you would not be able to come up with a better villain name than Leonard Leo for this guy.
True. I hadn't thought about it that way, but
he looks like the fucking Penguin. His name is Leonard Leo. That's a Detective Comics Bill Finger name. Okay, he's a fucking villain. He's a villain. Talk about how he's a villain. If you don't like all the stuff that happened this week, he's the guy responsible. He set up the system and the architecture and made this possible. That's who done it. Shine a light on that motherfucker and show everybody what he's doing. He names these guys, rams them in there, pairs them off with a billionaire to pay for every goddamn thing they can imagine. And yeah, the hypocrisy that everybody's pointing out, yes, of course it's hypocritical. Clarence Thomas, no one shall have affirmative action. Clarence Thomas said that? Brett Kavanaugh, you will not have your debts forgiven. Brett Kavanaugh said that? Yeah. Amy Coney Barrett, oh, affirmative action is bad. A woman said, what are you talking about? You know, the hypocrisy is maddening. That's part of the problem. It gets everybody outraged, but the real outrage has to go towards the system itself. And the best way to fix this particular system is expand the fucking court, okay? Sheldon Whitehouse told me on my show, there is no popular support for this. That's what he said. Why aren't we doing it? Because nobody wants it. That's what we want. There, 3 fucking words. It fits on a goddamn bumper sticker, Democrats. Expand the court. Biden, say, I will expand the court if you reelect me. We will expand the court. That should be the fucking mantra of the goddamn party from now until 2024. I'm done.
Yeah. No, yes. I think it was, but let's backtrack a little bit. First of all, kudos to you for not just naming the villain, but framing it in such a way that everyone can be outraged at the integrity, the lack of integrity in the system itself, right? It's like, God, we're all held hostage by just one unfuckable dude, right? It's like, you know, that can't be, right? And so that kind of framing is exactly how to do it. So it's like, it's this one man and what he likes and he doesn't like in his little prissy life versus all of us, you know, women having autonomy over our bodies. That's not a hard fight to pick a side on. So I kudos to you for that. The other thing I would say is I remember Biden talking as part of it. He did run on this in 2020. It was like, we need to look at reforms. We're going to have a committee together. We're going to put everybody together and see what we can do, what we can't do, blah, 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 about fixing the court because there's corruption in there. And then it got dropped. But
it did.
That got a lot of votes. People showed up for that. We were outraged.
That's why they're going to show up.
Exactly. We were outraged at Amy Coney Barrett getting crammed through at the last minute, which is why there was talk about that at the time, because there seemed like there was something so wrong about all of that. And Mitch McConnell just being so craven and weird but you don't have to wait for that. We're in the throes of this. We're feeling it more than ever before. I think my first fucking thing was expand the fucking court, right? Like, so you and I have been, you know, all caps tweeting that for a couple of years now, since Coney Barrett got crammed through. So I was very disheartened when I heard Sheldon Whitehouse say that on your podcast. It really knocked me out because I was like, what? This is all of a sudden gone? Because we all fought for this. We voted for this. We wanted this. And there's something just weak. There's a weakness that goes with that first topic of like, well, we're just going to policy our way out of this, or we're going to make people just see there's a cowardice in there. There's a fear. It's not wisdom, it's fear. And there's some wisdom mixed in there. We need to sort of figure out a way to separate, I think, the wisdom and the fear. So it's like, yes, we know what we can do and what works and what our limitations are and what we have to do and we're in reality, but also we know what moment we're in. We know what moment we're facing. And we're going to face it fearlessly. And we're going to try some new things, as you used to say, every single week. Try something, anything, just try.
Try something, yes.
Chance, do something. If PREVAIL is gone and and he's not there for a vote, then pass a vote. Like wait for people to go on vacations. Who cares? Take advantage of the moment, seize it, and push what you can through. I think we got to get past the fear. I don't think it's about bringing, a butter knife to an AR-15 fight.
Right.
I think it's just about not wanting to fight. And I don't think that there are some folks in some leadership that don't want to perceive themselves that way, as being afraid to fight, but they are.
Yeah, they are. They are. Okay. After a rant like that, LB, I get to be, I feel like I need to take a little, like a little vacation. So I'm thinking about where I should go, and I don't know. I'm open to new ideas.
Are you sick of same old boring vacation? Tired of renting house at beach? Why not go someplace new and exciting? Why not take family adventure to Belarus? Hi, I'm Yevgeny Prigozhin of Wagner Group. When I want to take break, even in middle of military coup, I always have charming holiday time in Belarus. Whether I'm in primeval forest of Bolovsyskaya Pushka, Babruysk Fortress in Mogilev Oblast, or 10th floor walk up in downtown Minsk, where I am right now enjoying scenic view of Brick Wall, Belarus truly has it all. One more thing, women in Belarus are most beautiful in world. How beautiful are they? They are so beautiful. There is city named, and I not make this up, Brest. On subject of chicken, I might have been Putin's chef, but I'm your travel advisor. Belarus is best place on earth, better than where you are right now, and certainly better than that dump Moscow. Belarus, like Russia, but pretty. And now, back to the show.
Oh, Chunk. Just, I love him so. Speaking of Chunk, he's going to join us on the after hours tonight.
Oh, good, because I got to go move things.
Yeah, I know you're moving, but there is going to be an after hours, which I forgot to announce. Okay, but Chunk is going to be there. We'll talk about this video and more. I want to get to our guest who's been waiting patiently and has been laughing a little bit, so it's good. I think it's okay. I think he's not too bored. He's a Ukraine expert who was the past chair of the Ukrainian American Bar Association. He's written for the Hill and for CEPA, and I've had him on my podcast a couple of times, and I learned so much from him about the history of Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia, and he really helped me learn about this stuff and inspired me to write about it as much as I have. And I feel so much smarter from having by osmosis picked up some of his knowledge base. So very excited to welcome Victor Rud to the program. Victor, how are you?
I'm okay. Thank you very much for the invite.
Yeah.
For you.
So we were talking a lot before the show started, and last week we did not have a show. We had to, because certain people were moving and needed to move their stuff, I think. So, and while the show would have been happening, Prigozhin was doing whatever he was doing in Russia. And, of course, everyone asked me, what's going on with Prigozhin? Like, I don't know. I try to figure it out, and you read all the experts. People were saying one thing Friday night, something else Saturday morning, something else Saturday afternoon. So what is your take on what happened with that? Let's start with there.
Sure. Well, that little clip you just showed about Belarus, we don't know where Prigozhin is, number one. The scuttlebutt is he was supposed to go there. And let's understand as well, this is not a conflict or a dust-up between, good and evil. These are scorpions in a bottle.
Yeah.
And there are more scorpions and adult and baby scorpions all over the place. And the two protagonists are not just Putin and Prigozhin. It's not surprising that something like this would happen, although I caveat that statement by saying nobody really knows exactly what happened or the reason for it, but the ostensible reasons, of course, are that Prigozhin got bent out of shape. He wasn't getting the support that he felt that he needed, and basically complaining Russia should have been a lot more effective and a lot tougher and more rapacious and more genocidal than it was already in Ukraine. One thing that we learned, or at least those people who would not believe it, but apparently have learned that as a matter of fact, this was not a private army. This was a state-paid, state-funded operation. And I'm not going to go into the details globally of where the Wagner Group has operated. And it was not a coup. That's the way, as a matter of fact, before I came on, I was listening to CNN, and Aaron Burnett characterized this as a coup. Not specifically with that purpose in mind, but that's the terminology she used. This was more of a military mutiny than a coup. Prigozhin never, ever, to my knowledge, articulated anything against Putin. He didn't in the past. It was always the military leaders. And he could never have been so foolhardy, as to contemplate, taking over the Kremlin, kicking out Putin, so on and so forth. We're hearing everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, and it's amazing. It's almost like a dog whistle. Well, this shows how weak Putin is, and so on and so forth. Well, yeah. Where have you been? Why do we think that only now Putin is weak? And yeah, you could make the conclusion, one country with 140 million being able to best a multitude of countries that account for maybe 2/3 at least of the world economy, where Russia only has the economy of New York City. So how could a weak Putin have done that? And doesn't this really show now that he is weak? Well, Russia only accomplished what it did because of our basically delinquencies, our fecklessness, and the like. I could go into, ongoing details about that. But my biggest concern, I think, is that there's an undercurrent. Some of it is articulated, some of it is there, but it's palpable, and we're apoplectic about the lack of stability. Heaven forbid things go south in Russia. They've got a bunch of nukes, and that is not what we want. And one of my concerns is that that is a bias. It's built into our cultural and our political DNA, where we want stability, we want to be able to manage a situation, and we are not ones that are known for sufficient strategic acumen in order to constructively take advantage of what could be stability and upset within the Russian Federation. Let's understand as well that the Russian Federation, it's an empire.
Yeah.
The inner core of, let's say, 3 concentric circles. The second one was the Soviet Union. And the third, the outer one that people recognize more or less as an empire, of course, are the countries of Eastern Europe. Well, that's gone down. That's fallen apart. The Soviet Union has fallen apart. And nothing terrible has happened after those 2 events, right? And sooner or later, I think it's going to come to pass that these tensions are going to grow within the Russian Federation. You can't keep, look, the countries, it's the largest country in the world. 1/3 of Asia is occupied by what we call Russia. If you take Russia's border and you stretch it around the equator, it'll go around the planet 1.5 times. That's a big country, right? The war against Ukraine, and I'm wandering a little bit here and I'm moving away from your question, Greg, but I'll go back.
That's okay.
The war against Ukraine is not a war for territory. Russia does not need more territory.
Right.
It seems that way because you have, Russian occupied territory and Ukrainian territory, and you have the battle lines and you have the arrows on all the maps that on all the, programs and everything else that you see. But it's really the humanity on that territory that Russia wants and needs, which of course is the entirety of Ukraine. And why is that? Well, because it can't have that example across the border as an example for its own populations, simply because Ukrainians and Russians are diametric opposites. Maybe one of the things that the war has brought forth to academics and politicians and laymen alike in the West is, despite everything that we've been learning for a century, it's just been friggin' wrong. That you don't go about bombing, raping, and obliterating people who are the same as you. You don't do that. That's true. And the fact, of course, is that it's not. They're 2 opposite things. Our approach, I think, to the war in Ukraine is a little backwards. It's bizarre that we predicate our support on if Ukraine is doing badly or poor or doing well.
Mm.
Well, you would think that it would be the opposite. If somebody who is attacked is doing poorly, you would think you would rush in with more support than if doing well. Well, with Ukraine, it's been the opposite, right? It's only after the expanded invasion last year, when Ukraine was able to repulse the Russians, that people said, oh, well, maybe we can win, so let's support Ukraine, right? And that's the same kind of thing that we are hearing right now. Well, Putin must be weak because of Prigozhin and what happened with the attempted mutiny. Well, listen, so maybe we really ought to support Ukraine. Well, you can't make those decisions on whether or not Ukraine is doing well or doing poorly. You have to make your strategic decisions based on something a lot more than that. And I'm frankly kind of surprised myself when you look at the multiplicity of systems, armaments, and everything else that the Ukrainians have to learn and master and maintain and have spare parts for and know how to repair these things, never mind how to use them. If you throw that hardware, on any other country in the last minute, and for them to do as well as they did, I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But that still is, Greg, all of that, that's the micro stuff.
Yeah.
That's micro. The big picture is, who cares? So what, right? That's the real issue here. And as I exchanged in our little colloquy before we went on, it's not just the forces of light versus the forces of darkness, although the darkness, I'll tell you, it is a lot worse than what we hear and the reporting that we get.
Yeah.
It is, I can't quantify it, but I'll tell you, it is 10 times, it is 20 times worse.
Do you think we're going to ever hear about this, Victor?
I'm sorry?
Do you think we're ever going to really hear about it? Do you think we're going to, it's shocking to me we haven't started, the war crimes haven't really, it feels like there's all this talk around it and nothing is kind of progressing.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of talk about it. It's like, herding cats. And there's a lot of, on the war crimes and the like, there's a lot of bona fide interest and concern. And it'll come out, I think. I think it'll come out. But in terms of what's necessary for a democratic society, whether it's in the United States or in Europe or elsewhere, you have to have an informed electorate. If you don't have an informed electorate, then you know what happens. Nothing happens, right? And we are just so poorly informed. There's a lot of, I think, knee-jerking about Taiwan and China, for example, as the preeminent threat, which long-term probably is true. But look at it this way. Look at it the way the Chinese would look at it, or Iran, or any other, tyrant wannabe. They see a country, Ukraine, which happens to be the largest country in Europe. Okay, so I'll throw that in just to give you a sense of perspective, and so that people don't say like, who the hell was it? It was Tucker Carlson who said, well, Ukraine is some little country, it's like Senegal in Africa. Well, no, it's the biggest country in Europe, just as a reference point. When we strip it of its nuclear arsenal and force Ukraine to give the weaponry to Russia.
Which happened in what, 1996? Is that when it was? 94. Okay.
And then we required that Ukraine destroy its conventional weapon. We did both.
Yeah.
Then what does that say about our strategic acumen in terms of doing something like that? And some of those missiles, by the way, without the nuclear warheads, are the ones that have been terrorizing Ukraine. But what does that say about nuclear non-proliferation? What does that say about, and our consequent behavior, our self-deterrence in light of what we perceive as a nuclear threat from Russia? What does that say about non-proliferation? And you think North Korea is going to give up its nukes? Everybody under the sun is going to try to get a nuke because they can see what a nuclear-powered state can do and how it can intimidate even the United States, right?
Yeah.
So people look at that. You look at the fact that on this issue of integrity, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and everything else, which is what World War II was all about, right? I mean, if anybody knows anything about history and wars, people certainly know about World War II. Well, okay, that's what it was for. Ukraine lost 8 to 9 million people. So if we don't take a stand, an effective stand with Ukraine now, what's our credibility with Taiwan? Taiwan is not an internationally recognized state. It's not a member of the UN. Ukraine is a founding member of the UN. We withdrew recognition from Taiwan in 1979. So where's our credibility in terms of dealing with China over Taiwan? People will say, well, yeah, but Taiwan doesn't have what Ukraine has. Taiwan's got computer chips. Okay, well, Ukraine has potato chips. And I don't mean that jocularly. I'm saying about food, right? Ukraine generates food for tens of millions of people in Africa and in the Middle East.
Yeah.
The repercussions are tremendous. They're huge. And I'm concerned that when we go back to the issue of an educated, informed electorate, that information doesn't come out. It just doesn't come out. This looks like another war. And, well, Russia, yes, it has the largest nuclear force in the world. How did that come about? Well, guess what? It came about because we love agreements. We love militarized agreement. Let's have another negotiation. Let's have another contract. Well, this is what your contracts and your agreements have led to, that you now, the largest country, or we're not the largest country in the world, but we had the nuclear monopoly after World War II. We are now really the ones who are intimidated by Russia as a nuclear power. And, where's the Western technology? It's in the nuclear weaponry and the other weaponry. It's another thing that we've done that was dumb and stupid through the ages. So all in all, what happened with Prigozhin, it's interesting. It is, I don't think it is going to weaken Putin as much as people think. This guy celebrates Stalin's birthday. He's not stupid. He's vicious. And I think what you'll see is a solidification of his power and his control, certainly internally. I think everything goes now. He can do a general mobilization, and he's going to justify it as, look what could have happened. And I'm not very optimistic that we're going to be able to exploit it well enough.
Well, okay, so they just passed this resolution in the Senate about that an attack, if Russia blows up the nuclear plant in Ukraine, that's considered an attack on NATO per the Senate resolution. That seemed like weird time. There's a lot of other shit going on last week, but that piqued my interest. And Zarina Zabriskie, our friend who's been on this show a bunch of times, has been screaming about that nuclear plant for 2 years now. Oh my God, they're going to blow it up. They're going to blow it up. And she's terrified that this is what's going to happen. So if they blow it up, does that open the floodgates to NATO? And then what happened? I mean, should NATO go in the event that happens? Like, what do you think would happen if and when something happens with that nuclear plant? We know Russia done it.
Well, the most consequential thing that you just said or asked is, if we know that Russia did it. Well, that's the first sand in the gears, because there is going to be such a well-prepared run-up to that. That it's going to be marketed as a false flag operation by the Ukrainians themselves, trying to blame the Russians to induce the West to do something. And that alone, in democratic societies, I think, and I'm concerned, is going to toss up so much black and so much dust that I think we're going to be paralyzed. I think if there was ever a time, and I wrote a piece on this, if there was ever a time that I think we could have nipped this in the bud, is immediately in the first days. We didn't do that. We packed up our embassy and left. But then, at least after the mass murders and the genocides that occurred in Bucha and Irpin 3 or 4 months later, then NATO does not have to have an attack against one of its member countries in order to act in unison, right? It doesn't have to do that. It can move in. And as a humanitarian mission, at least to provide air cover and the like for humanitarian corridors and aid, could have done it. I think the credibility and the interim effect that we could have had with, beating the NATO drum, I think Putin has dismissed it.
I mean, he blames NATO anyway, so we might as well just do it. I mean, and I don't know. It's one thing to go send NATO troops into Ukraine to help defend it. It's quite another to invade Russia, which is not what nobody wants Russia. You guys can keep it.
No. We're not talking about that. But look how this works. Look how the mind game works. The occupation of the brain. You have a fact on one end of the spectrum. You have information about the fact. You have knowledge of the information. Then you have a stage of assessment. You have a judgment and a conclusion. And then you make a decision to do or not to do something. That entire spectrum is what the Russians play on with maskirovka, desinformatia, agitatia, provocatia, all that other stuff. But the most effective tool has been very, very simple, and it works wonderfully with us, particularly on NATO, is you accuse and you demand and you threaten. NATO is a head game. Putin knows, as Stalin knew, that NATO was not ever intended to be an offensive alliance against Russia, right, or the Soviet Union. Putin knows the temper of the times. He knows that the Western electorate in Europe and in the United States wouldn't tolerate anything remotely resembling an offensive operation by NATO against Russia. But look what this constant harping has done. It has, in our mind, it has conditioned us, it has established reflex control. We are convinced that NATO's involvement is a red line. We are convinced that NATO attacked Ukraine, that Putin attacked Ukraine because it was afraid that Ukraine was going to join NATO. It's a dragon theory that tyrants want to have in order to control the fortress. You tell the populace, there's a dragon outside the gates. I can do and I must do whatever I want to keep the dragon out. I was talking with a top former retired person in the hierarchy a little while ago, and the rebuttal was, well, Victor, I really don't believe you when you tell me that NATO is that Putin is really afraid of NATO. It's not afraid of NATO because look how many divisions they have arrayed against. Look at all the hardware and all that. And my answer is, well, yeah, precisely. It's part of the state set. That's what you drag out onto the stage. That's the way you set it up. Putin is not afraid that NATO will attack him, but he is afraid to engage NATO if NATO went in. And I think that an internet, I don't care whether it's NATO, whether it is, heaven forbid that the UN is effective for something in our lives, but that if there were an international effort to provide security for that plant, and if it goes up, it's going to make Chernobyl and Fukushima look like child's play. And when people argue that, well, it's really going to affect Russia as well because you can't control where the wind blows. Russia doesn't give a shit where the wind blows, so it blows out his troops as well. So what, right? And what's going to happen? I'm concerned that unless we really, really double down and demonstrate resolve and political will, I am as concerned as your other speaker was about what can happen there.
Yeah.
With the Zaporizhian plant, they mined it, and they mined it for a purpose.
Right.
People aren't aware of what happened. Look at the report. Look, I'll give you an example. I mentioned to you throwing dust up in the ears and sand in the gears, dust in the air. The dam that was blown up by Russia on the main river bisecting Ukraine. It's like the Mississippi, the Dnieper River. That damage and destruction was horrific. It was horrendous.
Yeah.
And the response, the way it's reported here is there was a break in the dam. Well, yeah, there was a break of the dam. Well, that's like calling a bullet to the head, calling it a headache. It was a Russian destruction, intentional destruction of the dam for further downstream destruction. So they did it there, and they can very well do it. They could very well do it then, and it'll just be disastrous. But you know who's not afraid? As you move closer and closer to the battlefield, to the countries who have dealt with the Kremlin, the closer you move to the battle, the closer you move to the potential catastrophe, the less afraid those countries are, and the more certain they are of what has to be done. The further you move away, we're about as far away as we can be, right? Well, we're sometimes, some of the commentators here are near apoplectic about it all. But it's reversed, going closer to the scene. So you really have to ask yourself, well, why aren't we paying a little bit more attention to these people? Why aren't we taking advantage of that experience, that assessment, and that analysis? We really never have. And we now have what we have. Going back to your first, leadoff question on Prigozhin, I don't know what's going to happen, but he's not for this earth for a long time. And it
That's what I predicted. I thought one of them. Yeah, I was like, one of the other is going to be going on in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
That's right.
I was like, when that happened, I'm like, yeah, one of them. Not that it was a coup, but it's not. Prigozhin's not going to last, or maybe if Patrushev is behind him, if people are behind him, then Putin's not going to last. Like this was either I don't know. You can't.
I got afraid for a second. I was like, what if he dies today and we have this lovely fake ad planned? Do I run it out of respect for the dead? And then I thought, no, he's a fucking butcher and he fucked with the 2016 election, and fuck him. We're going to make fun of him even when he dies.
Yeah. And you may never know. All you're going to know is you haven't heard of him. You haven't seen him. Where is he?
He's in Belarus, which is the equivalent of, that's a farm upstate where you send your dog, right?
And where he is may be a mystery, like Jimmy Hoffa. Yeah. Right. So
Hoffa apparently was jigged with the concrete into one of
Meadowlands.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's somewhere between the two goalposts at the football stadium here in the New Jersey Meadowlands.
Yeah, is that? Or
I think he went through a wood chipper and he's fertilizing something somewhere. I don't know.
No, I think it's like them. I'm pretty. It was who was it? It was Luciano's godson, Costello's kid. Yeah.
Eric Trump? No.
No.
Yeah. So okay, I want to change tack a little bit because Ukraine has been able to fend off these. I mean, obviously, I don't want to downplay the horrors of the genocidal atrocities that have been committed, but Ukraine has managed to be, I think, more successful than a lot of people thought with the occupying forces. So, what's the best outcome here that we can hope for, and what should the U.S. do? What should NATO do? Well, if you're Joe Biden, what do you do to end this thing? Because it feels like Russia is also, they are weakened right now. If NATO was ever going to invade, now's the time, because their whole army is in Ukraine and they're half dead. So
Yeah, why do we think that their nuclear forces are? I mean, you don't want to roll the dice on it, but why do you think their nuclear forces aren't in any better shape than the conventional forces?
That's exactly. I've been saying this for weeks. Like, it's technology from 1940. You go to Moscow and like the brickwork is all like they're too drunk to do brickwork properly. They can. And Arthur Snell was on my podcast a couple weeks ago, and he was saying like tactical nuclear weapons, which are the kind that they said they're thinking about using. The more tactical and surgical nukes are, apparently, I'm told, but the more complicated the technology, which means the more likely it is that they'll fuck up and not be able to do it. The North Koreans launch shit into the ocean all the time, you know? So I agree. I think it's all fucking bluster.
Look, Greg, you asked a question. What should be done? Number one, Biden made a very, very strong statement, repeated several times, about protecting every square inch of NATO territory. Right? That is a stand taken on the basis of principle and practicality, because it touches upon and it controls deterrence credibility on the part of NATO. We have a lot of backfilling to do because we basically capitulated and tossed the rule book out the window when we essentially accepted Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014. All right. If you're talking about a violation of international law and the rules-based order and everything else that people talk about outside of human death, outside the issues of war crimes, atrocities, and genocide, if you take that area of international law off the table and talk about international law and principle, territorial sovereignty, and so on and so forth, we gave up the ghost in 2014.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you. Like, it feels like Crimea, where we failed, was Crimea. Where everybody failed was around Crimea. It was 2014 with what happened there. Our response to it all was ridiculous. Just put, Obama wagging a finger in Putin's face while he's smirking at him. Like it's the whole thing was absurd, right? And a tragedy. And it just feels like that was it was like, okay, now I see how you respond to this. I can take the whole country.
And what happened since then, I'll return to your question as well. I'm sort of bouncing around a little bit, Greg. What happened in Crimea and then subsequently the invasion of parts of eastern Ukraine was never really reported. I mean, if, what's going on now, it's the same human misery and bloodletting and human horrors that have been going on for 8 years but never reported. Now, granted, now at a much larger scale, but it was the same stuff, but it was off the radar. And then all of a sudden, everybody's surprised in February, right? So my point in sort of going back to that is anybody who thinks that, well, let's negotiate and reach some sort of agreement. Well, let me tell you, every single issue you would negotiate, all of those agreements are already in place, and they've been in place for decades and generations since World War II. Every single issue, reparations, punishment for genocide, territorial integrity, everything else has been in place. Now is the process, now is the moment of enforcement of all of those past agreements. This is what happens when those agreements are breached. So don't tell me that let's have another agreement, because you're going to have
what we have. Yeah.
Well, you're going to have the same thing all over again. You're going to have to enforce it. Don't run away from the enforcement responsibility for all of the agreements that have been applauded and that you reached. And now, ironically, you're trying to reach an agreement because you're intimidated by Russia that has the nukes, and they have the nukes, and they achieved the nukes because you had all of the arms control agreements that made you now second and made Russia first. And how many agreements and how many times do you have to make the same mistake over and over again?
So how do you enforce it? What is it beyond the sanctions?
The enforcement is what you're doing right now. Russia breaches, and you enforce it with the military assistance and the other assistance you need to get back to the status quo ante, get back to where everything was before. We can't seem to understand it. The example I was going to raise, I don't know, Greg, whether maybe I raised this in another, in an earlier podcast or writing with you, but Fred Coleman back in the 1980s was the Moscow correspondent for Newsweek magazine when we still had Newsweek as a magazine together with Tom. And he writes about going to, and if I mention this to you, cut me short.
It's fine to repeat. It's totally fine.
He mentions a visit to the Soviet embassy where Anatoly Dobrinin was the longtime Soviet ambassador there through three or four administrations, and this would have been the successive one. He visits them in January or February after the presidential election. And he asks the secretary, well, is Mr. Ambassador looking forward to meeting the new president? Because that's what happens. The president comes in, he meets all the ambassadors. And the answer is, well, yes, Mr. Coleman, the ambassador is looking forward just the way the teacher is looking forward to the first day of kindergarten. The same, never mind the arrogance. The arrogance isn't the point. The point is that was probably the best encapsulation and characterization of our delinquency and not being able to learn from our experience. Every administration comes in thinking they can do better than the prior one. They don't capitalize on a long history, and it's cyclical. If you can't learn from your experience, you never grow up.
Yeah.
And if you can't learn from your experience, you cannot project and plan and anticipate the future. You have no strategic acumen whatsoever if you can't extrapolate from the past. That is our singular failure with Russia and the Soviet Union. And China today, everybody's beating the drum about China. Where the hell were you when we, quote unquote, opened up China to the world, right? We wanted a cheaper frying pan. You have it, baby. And now look what you've got. You want to go and get your medications at the CVS? Hey, tomorrow, no more medications. Where was the brilliance in doing that? And the very same people who are pounding away about China, and I understand China very well, but ironically, if you were to put them back way back when with Nixon and Kissinger, they would have been beating the drum to open, quote unquote, open up China, fund them, transfer technology. And we did, before that, we did it with the Soviet Union. We established the economic base for the Soviet Union, and we are reaping the consequences. We were for generations. We just don't learn. And we're not interested in learning. And yet we're always scratching our heads wondering, well, no, what the hell do we do now? You don't achieve anything by being purely responding and reacting. We don't have the strategic acumen except in very, very narrow instances with a very small number of individuals. I think Biden is, I think Biden would have accelerated. I think his instincts are good. I think he would have accelerated his assistance because I do think he understands how all of this extrapolates on a global scale. But I think he's being held back by Jake Sullivan on the National Security Council.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And a couple of other people. But I think his instincts are good.
Yeah. It's tough. It's a tough needle to thread because he's got to. First, NATO was in tatters. He had to put that all together, which he did in like a fortnight, right? Yeah, after Trump spent 4 years trying to break it up. Right. Even Boris Johnson kissing the Biden ring at the time. And, try to hurt them without, starting World War III, which everyone's terrified of. I don't think that would really happen, but.
Would not happen, Greg. That excuse me for interrupting. That's exactly one of the points that I had in mind when I was talking about look at the approach, the thinking, and the assessment of the nations who had to deal with this, not
Right.
theoretically, not academically, right? And
Like
yet,
what? You're talking like Finland, like
I'm
Poland,
talking
like
about Finland. I'm talking about
Yeah.
Baltic countries. I'm talking about
Moldova,
Poland,
like
yeah,
Georgia.
yeah.
Okay.
And yet, sometimes we learn. Fiona Hill, she wrote a piece in the New York Times op-ed piece in 2004 in January. I told you this, captioned, let's stop criticizing Putin and start helping him. Okay. This was his war against Chechnya. Okay. Chechnya had signed a bilateral international peace treaty with Russia, and Russia crossed and invaded and destroyed. Well, Fiona Hill now has learned a little bit, and she
I
is
hope
right. Excuse me?
it wasn't for show. Yeah, I actually don't know that I knew about that 2004 article. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, we have this guy from day one.
Victor comes with all the receipts. He comes with all the receipts. Yeah, he does. And he's right about things from way back, from way back. And said before the show began, he's like, I hope this doesn't come off as I told you so, I told you so. But you're not coming off as I told you so, I told you so.
No,
it's not at all. I think you could take more bows. Not that it, you're right and everything's horrible there. So it's not. It's a mixed bag. But I wish more people would listen to you. But on the other hand, I think that your work is so important. And I'm talking personally now. I learned so much. And I think people watching this have now learned about it. Kind of the whole Ukraine history vis-a-vis Russia and the Soviet Union. One of the things that you taught me was that, really the U.S. tends to look at the Soviet Union and Russia as one and the same, and it's not. The Soviet Union was an empire. The Russian Federation is the remains of that empire. It's still an empire. It's not the same thing as just Russia. And what Putin wants to do is make that empire stronger and expand it, because if you go back in Russian history, most of their wars are wars of expansion. They're trying to take more territory. So this is all important stuff to know, and they're doing the same thing now. It's been the same since 47 when Ivan the Terrible became the first czar. They live under a tyrant and they just try to take more land. That's just what they do. It's just their thing.
Well, I have my question, so I'm going to ask it to Victor since I have you here. So this is a question I ask folks that know of Putin or study, the contemporary Russia. So if there was a choice, just in your opinion, if you don't want to weigh in, that's fine. If there was if Putin had a choice, choice A is you get to have the Soviet Union back. It all comes back together. It's all this thing, but you have to actually take only the statesman's salary that is afforded to you. Or choice B, you get to have something, a small little whatever, maybe
rump state.
Yeah, a little state. But you can keep all the money that all of your oligarchs have been pillaged, all of it. You get to have as much money as you can do all of your stuff that you're doing, and go wage your mercenary wars in Africa, go grab all of the shit that you want, all the natural resources out of Syria. Do your thing, your best you can, but you get to have all that money. Which choice do you think you take?
This is a question directed to whom?
To you.
To you. He gets to keep his mafia.
No, if Putin had a choice.
If Putin had the choice, he could keep his mafia and keep all of the spoils, he could keep his 50%, right? But have a tiny little territory. Or he could have the whole Soviet Union could come back and have all that territory. Everyone says he just wants the Soviet Union back together, but he'd have to live off of, I don't know, $210,000 a year.
Look, it would be the money, and it's interesting,
it would be the money. That's right.
It's interesting to ask that question, and I wish it were You know, it'd be interesting if it was presented that way in real life, but unfortunately it won't, right?
I know it won't be. It's more about there were years and years during the Trump era of pundits and people coming on talking about Putin and saying what he really wants, what we don't understand is he wants the Soviet Union back together, and this is all blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, this is the wealthiest man in the world, and he hides it. This is a man. This is the head. This is mob boss. He doesn't give a fuck about the Soviet Union. He wants what Ukraine. He wants the resources, but so that he can rape and pillage them and keep more money. So if he was given a choice,
Well,
I think the money.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I would add a twist to it. He wants, as all tyrants do, they want the money. They want, but it's also an issue of control and of power. And
fear of others. Yeah.
he has to quash and control Ukraine in order to dodge the bullet on it. And by the way, talking about NATO, well, if he controls Ukraine, then guess what? He has more countries. He has more NATO countries on "quote unquote" his border than before, right?
Yeah.
So where is this ostensible fear on his part of NATO?
Right.
Where is this fear of NATO with Finland now joining and bordering Russia? The whole, again, I'm diverting away from your question only because it sparks this thought in my mind again that NATO it's red line. No, it's not a red line at all. It's all BS.
Yeah,
but,
it's BS.
But we hobble ourselves with that conviction, and that's where the problem.
He's been also, speaking of BS, he's been saber rattling about the nuclear weapons for 20 years now. So that's probably BS too. Okay. We got to move on to the next topic. Victor, do you want to hang around or do you have to go?
Sure. No. I'm enjoying the party actually.
Okay, good. Okay. The audience loves you. We're getting good comments over there. So
you got a lot of love from the audience. We're gonna. If I have to bail on you guys, I apologize. This is like the one night I can't go for as long as sometimes we go. But
we're gonna run through this fast. We're gonna run through these things fast.
Yeah.
Do 5 minutes. We'll do 5 minutes for the next two. Okay.
5 minutes for the next two. Let's go.
Okay. Number 4, Trump behaving badly. Oh my God. There's the tape of him bragging. Look. Here's this. Look what Iran. Look, Millie wrote this about how we should invade Iran. And then these cackling, horrible women in the background. He's basically committing a Espionage Act crime on tape. It's really awful. And there it is. And that happened where? Did it happen in Florida where Alien Cannon is? It did not. You know where it happened? In New Jersey, motherfuckers. Yeah. I tweeted and Elmo let my tweet go out for once. I said, please let New Jersey be what takes him down.
Yes.
This is what we want. There's also the comments in Miles Taylor's book that's coming out about how, and I talked about this on my pod, so I won't belabor it. Trump, as president, talking about his sexual fantasies with his daughter to such a degree that the chief of staff had to reprimand him and be like, sir, maybe we shouldn't talk about your daughter in sexual terms now. So that's Trump behaving badly. I don't even does this even rate anymore? Is this even news at this point? It's awful and horrible that we have this guy that he's going to probably be the GOP candidate, whether or not he's in prison. And a third of the country thinks he's swell. Victor, I have not heard your take on this. So what do you think about all this stuff?
It is. It's a tragedy. It is sad. All joking aside, it is.
Yeah.
It is beyond. It's beyond horrific.
Yeah.
That such a nation founded on the principles that we did would have as a candidate as he probably, I guess he probably will be. And it's even worse, I guess, that the fan club isn't swayed. The more crimes, the more convictions, the more bad stuff that is proven. And I'm not talking about just, loose talk. I'm talking about proof. At a certain point, you got to accept a court's verdict, right? That the more there is, the more support there will be. What does that really mean? What does that say? It's I don't know that I can articulate anything more than say it is so horrifying. If you go and if you talk to countries elsewhere around the world, or at least I normally don't talk like with the man on the street. If I go somewhere, my talk with the man on the street somewhere, let's say I'm in Germany, will be the cab driver, right? Otherwise, or the concierge, but otherwise it's for meetings and conferences. So I'm not really dealing with the common folk too much. But if I were to do that, I think I'd hear the same thing that I hear from everybody else. Yeah. It's just unbelievable.
It's just
people
debate.
are just scared of
We're
that.
debased, and we're a threat now, and that's a scary thing. Yeah.
Okay. We can move on. We don't need to talk about Trump anymore. Fuck Trump.
Right.
Fuck Trump. Okay, this is the last topic, and we're going to bang through this because it's a lot of reading, unfortunately. There's this Moore. MOOR is the one of the cases decided this week. This is the one that said that the independent state legislatures could not just do whatever the fuck they wanted and be like, yeah, I know that we voted for Biden, but we're going to give it to Trump anyway. The Supreme Court was like, nah, they can't. State legislatures, ISL, can't do that. And everyone sort of was celebrating. But in Slate, Richard Hassan wrote a piece saying that there's a time bomb buried there. He wrote that this week. My man, Moscow Never Sleeps, on the Prevail Substack, wrote in December of 2020, 3.5 years ago. Is it really that long ago?
Yes.
Okay, I'm reading this. This is Moscow Never Sleeps here. 20 years ago, which is actually 23 years ago, when Gore and Bush were slugging it out in Florida over hanging chads, a team of young conservative lawyers made their bones briefing a loaded and receptive Red SCOTUS on reasons to stop the count in Florida and let W steal the election for Jesus and the unborn. The lawyers on that team are a who's who of Federalist darlings, names you will recognize: George Conway, John Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Michael Kavanaugh. Here is why Bush v. Gore is a landmine of a decision. Bush's minions made two parallel arguments which did not touch, but arrived at the same political end. First, they argued, Florida's differing electoral regulations across the state created a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, guaranteeing that a state afford all of its citizens the same voting rights. Second, the Florida Supreme Court interpreted Florida state election law incorrectly, and therefore, they argued, under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, SCOTUS is empowered to overrule state Supreme Courts on state electoral law when presidential elections are involved. The first was a bad beat for Al Gore, and then there's a paragraph I'm going to skip. The second argument is where Kavanaugh et al. Left a time bomb. That's the same word that the guy used in Slate this week. Okay. That almost went off this year and may yet, if Trump's crack legal team can find a way to bring his evidence-free grievance to the Supreme Court. Spoiler alert, they did. This is where you want to read carefully, and if you practice a religion, have a couple prayers handy, because this argument was a doozy. If it finds the right case to resurrect it, it did. It's game over for presidential elections that favor popular vote winners, i.e. the Democrats. The basic rule of small f federalism is that federal courts defer to state court interpretations of state law, except where a fundamental right in federal law would be affected. I'm now going to skip a big paragraph here of legal talk. In Bush v. Gore, Boof and Barf's team argued that another exception to the above rule should be whenever A, state Supreme Court possibly misinterpreted state law, and B, A presidential election is on the line. We skipped the next paragraph here. So, Keg King Kavanaugh helped craft an argument that under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution, governing how states may select their electors, any presidential election is automatically enough of a federal issue to require SCOTUS review of a state court's decision of state law affecting how electors are selected. This exception is a potential game changer. After all, every law a state makes regarding how its citizens vote in federal elections ultimately touches how it selects its presidential electors. Because the court had already found for Bush on the Equal Protection Clause issue, which alone threw him the electoral result he needed, there was no reason for the court to reach this question. Neither the liberals nor the centrists wanted to touch it, but that did not stop Scalia, whose son worked for Bush team's law firm, Thomas, whose wife worked for the Bush campaign, and Rehnquist, that's the Chief Justice at the time, who always appreciated a practical joke played on someone else, from filing a concurrence written by the Chief Justice, lauding the Article 2 argument and leaving it in writing for later use. It's called the Rehnquist concurrence. This is a thing you're going to hear now. Okay. Fast forward 20 years, actually 23 years, in Democratic National Committee versus Wisconsin State Legislature. The pre-Barrett court ruled 5-3 to allow the GOP Wisconsin State Legislature over the Democratic governor's veto to cut short to Election Day, the date on which mail-in ballots, in order to be counted, must be received. By itself, this case is an unremarkable and generally uncontroversial decision. Substantively, many battleground states, such as Florida, have identical deadlines, blah, blah, blah. So Bush generally, and the Rehnquist concurrence on the Article 2 exception specifically, had no reason to be mentioned or analyzed with approval in the Wisconsin case. So, and again, Moscow never sleeps, writing so beautifully as he does, the rat-faced little prick did both. Knowing that within days he and his pod of Federalist centrified judges would be seeing appeals from state Supreme Courts in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, the Kegmeister wrote a concurrence to the main decision where he dredged up the treasure he asked Rehnquist to bury for him 2.5 presidents ago. With less subtlety than he used on girls in high school, Brett Kavanaugh announced that, as irrelevant as it might be in Wisconsin, Rehnquist's Bush comments might be useful in cases where the legislature and Supreme Court of a state were in conflict over electoral rules. Almost immediately, federal courts and state legislatures took the hint that they should try to use the Rehnquist concurrence in their rulings to direct cases to the Supreme Court, which may enshrine that poison pill into actual precedent. December of 2020, he wrote this. Okay. Now, 2 days ago, this is what he tweeted. I wish about this case, this Moore case, I wish this were anywhere near good news. Kavanaugh did not join Roberts and the humans because he wants to preserve democracy. He wants ISL, that's the individual state legislatures, dead, so that in 2 years the pigs will use the Rehnquist concurrence he and Roberts briefed for Bush v. Gore. Under the concurrence, the federal courts, i.e. SCOTUS, can decide to set aside state laws that relate to how presidents get electoral votes. If the Supremes is loaded, that's the ball game, without having to worry about the legislative composition of half a dozen swing states. Since a 9-member court will be supermajority dog shit for another 20 years at least, unless we expand the court, guys, Kavanaugh's view protects the pigs with or without ISL, which could swing blue in any of those battleground states in the next decade or so. Kavanaugh, for all his faults, is a visionary. Once the little fuck explains to Alito and to Ginny's husband why his view is even more fascism-friendly than ISL, he'll have the 5 votes he needs to turn the concurrence into precedent, and for the next 5-6 presidential cycles, 5 judges nominated by men who swindled their ways into the Oval are going to pick the president, which is why we need to expand the court wider than, and he wrote something so disgusting I can't repeat it here.
Okay. So 2 things, and then Victor, and then I'm out. So this is the coup.
Yeah.
This is the coup. And it's been going on. Because I don't think that the 2 Supreme Court justices, were there 3? No, there were 2, that were actually on this Bush team are going to do what Ketanji Jackson did and recuse themselves because they
they're fucking so not.
They don't even think anybody's going to catch it. I'm glad that
Moscow.
did, but we are proper fucked. We are proper fucked.
Unless we expand the court.
Yeah, they're not going to expand the court.
Okay.
Victor just told us Americans never learn. They don't learn. They don't know how to learn.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do anything, but they already know the way of being, know how to do the thing that I did already. I'm just going to keep doing that, and it just because I'm insane. That's our thing. That's our gig.
Yeah, that's what we do. It's what we do.
Oh, this is a dour show.
It's fine. Victor.
Victor.
Now, you're a lawyer. You went to law school. You went to a very good law school. Does this all make sense to you? Tell us something hopeful.
Makes no sense, and I'm not in the business of selling snake oil hope.
Oh boy. Sorry, everybody. I think that's a really great quote, actually. Oh no. Oh, all right.
So do you think what he said makes sense? The Rehnquist concurrence, this is a real thing?
I don't know. It sounds like a cop-out answer. I don't know.
That's fine.
No, it doesn't. It sounds like there's a lot to process, but
yeah.
It is there's a constant wave for me of like, holy crap, the calculation, right? The long game that these folks have been playing is quite Soviet in nature. It's like
it is.
It's almost
some of it is, yeah. Some of it you could say is smacks of that precedent. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Wow.
Without the cool suits that they wore, in the Soviet.
Oh yeah. Right. The parachutes, right?
Yeah. Okay, so are we supposed to end on a Victor, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on, because I know that you've been on the pod a couple times. I think people are thrilled to see you. It's always nice to put face to voice and everything like that. And as always, I learned so much from your presence tonight. And this is a late show. Yeah, it was like it'll be an hour. It's an hour and a half. You're here for 2 hours basically. So thank you for joining us. It was so great. Are you on Twitter at all? Do you ever go to your Twitter page?
Now and again, but there's no time. If you go on Twitter, then you go on Facebook, then you go on LinkedIn, then you go to the computer, then you go with the message, with the phone. Like,
it's not worth.
You'll get at least 5 more followers here. Okay. And this is, I guess, this is how we can end. I think, first of all, quick announcement. Because we didn't even bother with announcements.
No.
Yeah, we're having an after hours. We're gonna have it at 9. We'll do it at 9:45. Okay, 9:45. LB may or may not be there. Chunk will be there with me. It'll be fun. I don't know what we're gonna be very, very not. We're not gonna talk about anything serious at all. That's the first thing. And I had a lighthearted thing to end on. Of course, it floated out of my mind. The announcement floated out of my mind because that's
it moved along.
It moved along like you.
Like me. Next time I see everybody, I will be somewhere else. Sayonara from every background everyone has been used to. Not this one. I've never been in this one. But so long, California.
What's interesting is, I can't even go outside here, by the way, because it's smoky and weird. So I don't know. My mother today referred to them as the what did she say? I should have written. I was driving. I would have written down because it was so funny. Like these stupid Canadian wildfire things. That's something like that. It was like she was so put out by like the Canadians are doing this on purpose or something. It's like this is the climate change thing. We haven't even talked about that. We'll do that on a future
have to bring Victor on to get your thoughts on some of that. Thank you so much for coming, Victor. It was lovely. Sharing this time with you. I really treasure it.
Yeah, we're awful at ending the show because I never want the
You're
show to
awful
end.
at it, so I'm ready to end it. So
Are you
I'm
ready to
gonna
end the
say-
show? You've got shit to pack. You've got a dog to walk.
And I have
Okay.
to run, Greg, as well. It's 9:30.
Good
I have
night.
All right, you go. Okay.
Yep.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Have a
I will see
wonderful
you in
weekend.
10 minutes. Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Take care.